Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Palantir Weekly number 76. We have Arnie, author of PalantirBullets.com, whose newsletter got some attention this week. Let's just say that. We've got Dom Rinaldi, who is up a lot of money on NVIDIA because he believed in it when no one else did. And we got Matt Money, who obviously has the sexiest beard on YouTube.
Matty Poor Boy.
Matty Poor Boy. We've got a lot to talk about. Palantir Weekly. Look, a lot of stuff happened this week. The stock price, AIP conference, interviews, short reports. There's a ton of stuff going on. Obviously, it's been an incredible week. Thank you all for being here right now. I guess let's get into AIP conference, biggest news of the week. I want to start off with Arnie, then we'll go to Matt and Dom. What are your raw thoughts on AIP conference? Obviously, we'll get more deeper into it, but kind of your 2-3 minutes on what you got from it. Did you think it was legit? Did you think it was too much hype? Did you really feel that Palantir lived up to the promise of delivering a good conference? Arnie, you can start.
What's really interesting to me is that even if we are studying this company for more than 2 years, almost 3 years now, it is really impressive that they can still impress. And I believe they actually did that in more than one occasion at this event. It started as usual with Carp just talking. There, nothing really new apart from hints, very important hints on the demand that they are receiving. But in terms of product, what we were seeing, especially from Shyam and another presentation I really loved, is like, whoa. I mean, they say they want to become the operating system of the modern enterprise. And now I really see why it is not only modern, but actually a next level compared with the existing things that are going on. Because basically, with AIP, if you can set the business well, it's like you have a machine that runs on its own, and you act more as a controller of that machine. That implicitly means that what Shyam says, that transforms your operation is not only a fancy sentence to say, but that becomes the truth. I would say it's not all roses because, for instance, the presentation of Shyam was great, but I would say very hard to follow, in my opinion. Even thinking that even if the audience that was there, packed audience, it probably that was too much in too few minutes to really digest. So maybe he would have shared just a little bit, but that was very clear rather than an explosion of things. But that tells you of how advanced they are and how ambitious they are in taking this opportunity. I think we have never seen Palantir so far being so convinced. Remember, it was 1 year ago that every time at the podcast we were discussing, you know what, it feels like they have this very powerful machine and they're not really executing on the opportunity. It's like they're missing money on the table. It feels like now it is the other way around. It feels like, okay, the opportunity is not only there, they have a machine, but now they are converging into exploiting that. I think the most important sentence Carp said in the entire event was, look, last month we received more inbound than the all last year.
Implicitly. That was huge.
That demand is really skyrocketing. That means, again, is a software business. That doesn't automatically means next quarter we fly. But if we fly at least in consumer adoption, we will see sooner or later the numbers. And what is really important to me is this is a new market. Getting in first and well will be the defining thing for the next 5-10 years or more. Because once you become the standard, you are there. And Palantir is absolutely focused in, we want to become the standard on using AI in our business.
Dom, what are your raw thoughts on AIP?
So I didn't see Sankar's piece, but I saw about 3 or 4 of the customer presentations. A couple things stood out to me. This is the third time that Jacobs has expanded their relationship with Palantir.
Yep.
And if we go back to what we were talking about 2-3 years ago, we talked about the business model, right? We talked about how it was such a unique business model in acquire, then to expand, and then scale. Scale is where we'll see the true ROI from a gross profits perspective and revenue. And multiple of these customer presentations, along with some new customers that we haven't seen before, presented. And I think we're seeing that now come to fruition, right? From their RPO and their billings in the 10K, and just in general as to them being profitable 2 quarters in a row. And I think what stood out to me the most on AIP was quantifiable value. When you look at, I just went through a course through a startup company that teaches at Harvard, and it's an online free course on YouTube. I can post the links, and it talks about these startups. And I'm looking at the slide here of you have to make sure your problem that you're trying to solve is very significant, right? For you to be a company to sustain long term, and I know Matt's worked with the product for many years, and his company's been a customer. The solution has to be valuable enough to reason for change in anything in sales. And then the pain has to be so great that it drives adoption for a change. And the gain has to be even greater for you to stay with something. So you look at all these places that have had Palantir for 5, 6, 7 years. I'm reading a quote here from Jacobs. Now we know what's going to happen before it happens. That's where we're finding the extra percentage points of optimization. The potential is monstrous. Millions of dollars for us, tens of millions for our clients. Like, let that sink in. Like I don't hear other companies, software companies, and their customers talking this kind of verbiage. And then you can see here the initial rollout, they saved 20% of plant-wide power savings through predictive operations. You look at another one here for Pacific Gas and Electric. 99% reduction in acres impacted by wildfires in 2022. Foundry is our central platform for data-driven decision-making and situational intelligence. It serves as the operating system that will enable effective end-to-end asset and risk management. Like, everything Karp said is now coming full circle. And it's just, I'm kicking myself, like, shame on me for not believing the guy even further and just, you know, really piling in. I mean, I put a lot of my money into Palantir, but execution's been great. And I feel more convicted than ever. I'm not worried about it retracing and price fluctuation. What I'm seeing through that AIP conference and what I've seen through customer testimonials is value is being realized. And now they're getting out there. To Amit's point, I do think they listen to the YouTube community and retail investors and others, or at least follow it, because they are putting quantifiable stuff out there like, hey, we saved X amount of dollars on this, you know, this thing here for our, and like, so when you can do that. And then my favorite part of this whole week, it wasn't even the AIP conference, it was the Bloomberg interview. Yeah. Where Karp says, the dude tries to break him down and say, what do you mean? You still don't have a standardized pricing model? And he says, would you? He said, the value that we deliver, we can ensure that we know we'll get a fair price back to our customer because of the value we're delivering. So
that's actually a good incentive, because then, you know, you're not trying to sell a flat fee to the customer, because the customer gets value and then they pay. I mean, that's the best way to do business.
And it just goes back to what he said earlier of buying software that's proven and works. And I've been doing software sales for over 20 years. And I can tell you, it is a lot of companies in general struggle with showing quantifiable ROI. and now they're really starting to get their customers to, like, that conference wasn't for us. That conference, I guarantee you, they're getting leads and deals and growth. And you look at all the new logos they had, like Cisco,
Who'd have thought?
HCA.
That's a $200 billion company. That's huge.
Yeah, like, so you just see that, and it's like, okay, if the biggest enterprise are doing this, and their business model of acquire, expand, scale, what is this going to look like in 3 years from now?
Matt, your raw thoughts on AIP. What do you think?
No, I think I'll just be point blank. The boys at UDoc, Undisclosed Oil Company, were buzzing yesterday. And, even before AIP kicked off, I got introduced to yet another application that I get to use on Foundry, and it's going to simplify my life immensely, once again, as it has been for the past 5 to 6 years. And then I had the fortunate time to, have 15 minutes before AIPCon started. And, I had obviously the person that, rolls out a lot of the Palantir applications or the Foundry applications within our organization say, hey, man, you going to watch this thing? And I said, yeah, I'm just going to go downstairs, grab something really quick and come back up. And of course, when I see people online, they're all buzzing, doing the same thing, thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? And they're all doing the same exact damn thing, going back up to their desks, going to look at AIPCon. But the thing that really made me excited, is obviously I had an opportunity to look at the demo, 2-3 weeks ago. I shared a lot. So Sham shared pretty much the same demo very, very early on. And Arnie, no disrespect to you. I respect your kind of perspective on what Sham said, and I can understand from maybe somebody that hasn't used it before, but the products before to an extent. The thing that I got most out of what Sham was talking about is how AIP is going to merge extremely well with Apollo. I knew that Foundry and Gotham were going to be huge interlinkings with AIP because obviously that's where the majority of the data is being used from a decision-making process on Gotham, or say like an operating system for data, in the case of a Foundry. But the thing that Sham really said, it was very early on, and I don't know if a lot of people caught it, was AIP, when you think about it, there's multitude of different modes and computations that you might need to be able to do on any sort of a given device. And so that being said, if you're somebody that's boots on the grounds in Ukraine, you probably don't need to have all the AIP and data connected to the United States, right? You're probably looking at very localized data to you. So your device can run very quickly from an AIP perspective because let's just say you're using a cell phone, using a tablet, using Titan that is maybe off the grid. It's going to be completely different. And Apollo is going to allow you to say, have somebody that is in a command center within the Ukraine or command center in Great Britain or command center in the US have access to these very large LLMs and ontology sort of models that are kind of already created in Foundry or Gotham, and a very small set or a small piece of software that's maybe uploaded to a phone, and having the ability to say have something that's like a Ranger version, which is very small compared to say the Eagle Eye version, which is very big, and having the ability to very easily turn those things on and off, I think isn't necessarily comprehended completely yet. So that was very exciting for me to kind of see. And then second, I think the thing that excites me the most, and not because I can sit here and say I told you so and listen to what I've been saying for the past fucking 40 weeks, but it's kind of just like some of that stuff is always kind of just an inference. And it's glad to see a lot what Dom kind of said, like it's glad to see that they're either truly listening to us or the conviction really is there and the product is really solid, and that we're not just pushing a bunch of bullshit onto people and it's actually real. And I think it's more of the latter, right? We could sit here all day as we have for the past 70 odd episodes and pat ourselves in the back and say, look at us, we got it right. Or we could say, holy shit, there's a reason why we're doing this every week. This has power to be the absolute best piece of technology that has hit the books since Microsoft came out with their operating systems in the early 90s. And I don't think people truly understand that yet. It's starting to get there. And the thing is what I want to caution people, as great as everything has sounded, as bullish as Karp has talked in the very beginning of AIPCon yesterday, it will take quarters to truly start to realize the true potential of the revenue that will be coming. Customer count is going to be something that you really need to look at. Are they getting the right people through the door? And I think also net dollar retention of the top 20 or top 50 clientele. I forget what they do it on. I think it's top 20 clientele. Look at the net dollar retention for that and how their revenue expands, as you see with Jacobs and Undisclosed Oil Company. Those things are going to, I was having great conversations yesterday with folks that work at Undisclosed Oil Company, and we were chatting about, is it really active and up and running yet? No, and I can't say too much, but like we're talking about it. We're in talks about how we can incorporate it. And the thing is that's beautiful is the ontology is already there in Foundry, right? Hooking up those models, you know, from an AI perspective to something that's already set up and beautiful lines of basically creating all these categories for it's like it's ready. It's been like something that's been in the works for years almost. It's literally just tapping on that next little bit of layer, and it's something that I don't think a lot of people take into account. But anyway, it just got me buzzing. It's got other people at Undisclosed Oil Company buzzing, and I'm just really excited that you see other people. And, you know, I give a lot of crap to people on Twitter, you know, talking about Palantir go to zero and everything. Obviously, I haven't sold a share. If anything, I want to buy more. And at the end of the day, I think that the folks that I'm really trying to like get after, you know, if you're really invested in the company, you're just finding out for the first time, and this is getting you amped up, I'm excited that you're here. For the folks that are literally here just to ride it from $14 to $20, and you're sitting there being like, damn, AIPCon, I really thought it was going to go to 20 so I could sell. Get the hell out of here, man. It's not your stock, right? But if you're looking to be here and you're joining for the first time and you see the fundamental shift of what this organization will have on the future of American business, welcome. And I really look forward to talking to you guys in the future.
Picking up on that, first of all, Matt, that was a phenomenal explanation. I think that was a great just perspective on trying to wrap up what the investor sentiment was this week from someone who actually can see the potential revolutionary aspect of the platform and the product and overall the company. I think we need to have a conversation about this for the next 10, 20 minutes. The stock in relationship to its valuation. Okay, so when the stock ran to 11 from $7, Arnie reduced his position from 80 to 50. And outside of some idiots that thought that was a bad move, I think all of us were like, yeah, if you run up 40% in 2 days, you should probably reduce an 80% position down to a mere 50% because that's just insane. He did not expect it was going to run up to 15. None of us expected it was going to run up to 15 and AI was going to be mania. And now we're kind of left with this question, which is, do you buy the stock now? Now, the answer is very simple. If it's 20-30 play, what's the difference between 11, 12, 14, 7? It's really not, doesn't matter if we're thinking it's a $250, $150 company. However, I think it is important to kind of address this issue of do you feel there is a retracement coming because the AI mania is so crazy, or do you think AIPCon validated enough of the AI mania to the point where the valuation theoretically could be undervalued even if the growth is only 18 or 20% this year? Or do you feel the growth has to go back to 25, 30% in order to justify a $30 billion valuation with a company barely doing $2 billion in revenue? Arnie, let's start with you and then we'll move to Dom.
Look, the principle I try to follow in terms of allocation is always try to have a position that makes me happy regardless of how the stock can move in the next future. Meaning, if I'm positioned correctly, I will be happy if the stock drops 50% or if the stock goes up 50%. That to me is a criteria I like to feel, okay, I have the right amount invested in this company. The reason why I trimmed, we shared it last week, it was because obviously the move up was based on pure interest on AI stocks and not for merits on Palantir alone. We could see that from NVIDIA, C3 AI, but generally tech skyrocketing, moved by hype on AI. But in the last week, something really different changed. To me, one of the most important things that happened in these last weeks was not AAP, was not the stock rising, but Ukraine saying, we are so happy with what we are doing that we are going to use Palantir as the key partner for our reconstruction. Are there any other company out there saying something similar? Not to my knowledge. And this implicitly validates a huge bet Palantir was making. Basically, Palantir invested 1 year to get this. And to me, this is like, okay, this is one announcement that potentially changes everything, as a good YouTuber would say. Why? Because so far we have been complaining that, hey, we're working for free. Now it's like, okay, once the war will end and the Palantir have a clear incentive now to finish this thing, a big value can be unlocked in terms of monetization. Probably it will be BlackRock organizing all the reconstruction funding and so on. So Palantir will get paid. Then AAP is the validation that the company is capturing the opportunity they have in front of them, which is what we were scared last year, as we mentioned before. So in terms of execution, I'm very happy. And even if I was already very confident, it's like before I was 99% confident, now is I'm 99.9% confident. This means that if the company is the right one, now it is only a matter of stock price. At the right price, I would be extremely happy to go incredibly hard. In a situation like now, where the multiple exploded, we are trading at around 12, 13x EV sales. The price is not expensive, is clearly not cheap. And now it comes really to the question, okay, what the growth will be. I don't like the idea of trying to predict the stock price. I like to react based on the opportunity we are facing. And right now, I see the price more in the fair zone rather than saying it is undervalued or it is overvalued. It is there, which on my part means, okay, I can do nothing. I let the business compound. If something stupid happens on both directions, maybe I think of acting. So far, I can just wait. But I'll tell you, given the recent developments, I'm actually really hoping some new bear caves arrive, hopefully with some grounded theory or thesis on why the stock could crash, and not on the usual eaten 100 times things that we have been discussing. Like, I think every one of us is already tired of talking about SPACs, Palantir being a consultancy, but that actually tells you how early we are. Like, the compounded knowledge that we are building here inside the community is literally 6 months ahead of the market. So imagine, is what Palantir sees, we develop things before, market accepts them. Internally, I have this feeling we make such a good conversation about the critical points that scare us as investors, because as investors, we have skin in the game. We don't write a report hoping the stock goes down by not putting our money on it. We are deep scared. And when you're scared, you are skin in the game. You take care of not missing the crucial things. So to sum up very quickly, we have a validation that what was a price only moved by hype on AI, I would say right now it is deserved. So even if technically trimming a position was a bad thing, I would say I'm happy I did it, because having the mental calmness to now say, okay, the stock goes at 8, I'm happy. The stock goes at 20, I'm happy. To me, is worth much more than the direct monetary gain.
Okay. Dom, stocks overvalued, undervalued. What do you think?
Compared to what, right? So that's what I'm first say is compared to what? Because your time horizon is going to determine if it's undervalued, overvalued. If I look at the price to sales ratio, it hasn't been this high since April 19th of 2022, when the stock was $8.58. So we're now at 14.41, and we're now 2 quarters profitable, and still no debt, with tons of cash, right? So I think it's a good debate, because I struggle with this too.
I think all of us are struggling with it as investors, right?
And I think the struggle is more or less not that do I think this is going to be a multi-bagger and I'm going to already the amount of money I've invested will yield fruit, meaningful fruit in the years to come. But do I think there are possibilities of irrationality in the environment that we're in the stock market? And the answer to that is, in my opinion, personal opinion, I say yes. I say that we are in unprecedented waters for the last, I don't know, 3 years. We've not been through a pandemic in a very long time. We've seen inflation. We've seen all these crazy things that we have going on in the world. And so do I think that the market can be as irrational as possible longer than you can be solvent? The answer is yes. So that's why when NVIDIA went to $4.30 a share, I knew it was going to go back down, but I also didn't want to just deal with the hassle of selling and then trying to get back in. And then really at the end of the day, when you look at it, how much extra shares did I really get, right? If I wanted to learn options, maybe I could do calls or something to make up more of a position. But at the end of the day, to Arnie's point, I just think that, okay, if it goes back to 10, I already have cash on the side and I'm ready to load up. So I think it's undervalued to the long-term play. To the DCF model now, if anyone looks at it, it's overvalued. But I'm holding this for many, 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 many years. So for me, I could easily see myself adding more, but I have a feeling at an 83 RSI, knowing the little I know about technicals, we're going to see a retracement eventually.
Matthew Money, is the stock overvalued or undervalued?
Yeah, I mean, I'd take the same sentiment as Dom. Really depends on what your time horizon is, right? If you're looking at the next 10 to 20 years, it's going to be a very different business than what we're looking at today. And so the price to earnings in, if you're looking at, a 28 or 20, $30 billion company today, it'll seem extremely cheap in 10 to 20 years, I feel. And I'm very confident about that. But if you're looking at what it's selling for today, just like what people were probably saying about Google right now, right? There's a big macroeconomic environment that we've kind of been on this 25, 30% run in a lot of stocks, and very fortunate that we've seen a little bit better of an environment for some of these very small, unprofitable organizations. Now Palantir is not really in that. So they're coupling the fact that it's profitable, not having to necessarily go to any sort of marketer or any, person to issue debt in order to get financing. So they don't have to necessarily worry about that. I'm sure that that's been a plus on the stock, other than the normal macroeconomic 30% that we've kind of seen over the past 6 months. And then coupling that with the fact that, the interest rate thing is going to kick over, right? And I think we're at the end of the tunnel, and probably about to see the light rather than continuing to have massive increases, right? I don't think we're going to go from 5% interest rates to 10. Would we stop out at 5.25%, 5.5%? Probably, but that's another 5 to 10% increase in the rates, right? Not a 100% increase in the rates from where they are today. So I think that there's a bunch of different things to kind of understand why the stock is up over 100% in the last 6 months. But that being said, I think for anybody that's new, that's joining, and I've mostly speaking to you guys, I feel like it's gotten a lot of press in recent times. I would say, really think about why you're in it. Think about the perspective that you're looking at. Are you looking short term? Are you looking long term? Short term, sell some covered calls, man. If you don't know how to write them, figure it out. Don't get greedy. You have to think. If I know some folks that honestly it's grown to over 10 or 20% of their portfolio. I talk to them on a pretty regular basis, and that freaks them out. They have 1,000 shares and they're like, this is a huge part of my portfolio. That's scary to somebody. I think it's like close to 15% of their portfolio. They say, I'm trimming some of it. And I'm like, go for it, man. Put it in the S&P 500, something that makes you feel slightly better at night, and not to say that as their portfolio grows, they can't dollar cost average into Palantir, but it's all about what makes people sleep well at night. It's personal finance. But to me, You know, it's something I've been writing covered calls. I've been running $20, $21, $22 covered calls because I don't want to get rid of the golden goose. You know, if I really wanted it, I'd be writing it closer to the money, $15, $16. And, you know, I just feel like within a day that could get blown through. And I'm not trying to play roll and catch up. You know, I'd rather just take a couple percent here, a couple percent there, take some money off the table. But you know, if for somebody that's looking to also enter a long-term position, they think it is short-term overvalued here, I understand that. You know, there's a lot of folks that know about cash secured puts. You know, Chris will tell you about them. I'm doing them on SLG. If you honestly think that the price is overvalued, or you just want to put some cash to work, you know, you could do that, right? You could say, I'll buy them at 10, but not $1 more than that. And if it doesn't get to 10, hey, you made a couple bucks here and there, and there's no problem with that, you know, waiting for a pullback, and if it doesn't get there, then, you know, maybe it wasn't meant to be. But like Dom said, man, it's really, you know, I could go off on a tangent for 6 hours talking about, you know, what you could do in any sort of situation. And I think that that's why some people don't necessarily relate, is because we'll kind of throw out all the possibilities, but it's really personal finance. And that's what you need to understand, is what helps you sleep well at night and what helps you get the exposure that you want.
And Matt, to that point, you just made some really good points there and wisdom. And so when we go back to 2021, when everyone was investing in any kind of small cap, and you were just like, things were just stupid. Like Cloudflare was at $220 a share. Like, I don't know why I didn't take some money off the table when it got to the point of that, where we're talking mind-blowing valuations, right? But if I had the conviction in Cloudflare like I do with something else like Palantir and NVIDIA, then that wouldn't be such a big deal. I say that because the stock market is extremely unpredictable. And if anyone thinks otherwise and thinks that they can figure it out long-term and predict it and guess more than not and be in and be out, good luck for you. Because a lot of people have been burned that way. And so how much is enough? Because if I look back at it, when my gut was saying back in 2020, I don't need these, you know, I was part of a different podcast at the time, and everyone was talking about these. It was all about the 10Xer, you know, get the 10Xer, get the multi-bagger, you know, and everyone's literally like doubling, tripling their money in like 3 months. And it's like, that's not normal. I was still learning in individual investing and enjoying those returns, but not understanding that's not normal, right? If you look at the history of returns. But in my gut, I was like, man, you know, I could probably take some of this and just put it in NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and they're not going anywhere. And I know for sure their business model, their finances will hold up over a decade. Wholeheartedly believe that. But instead, I let the money ride and ride all the momentum, and everyone was, you know, and I'm not talking about Palantir, I'm just talking about all these other small caps, right? Which is okay if you if that's your risk tolerance and everything else. But I say all of that because if you look at the returns that those 4 stocks had, and people back then were like, "Oh, their market cap's so big, they can't run up that much." Like, no, it's impossible. 2 trillion, 3 trillion, no, what? No. And now look at it, right? People are going to say the same thing and say, Apple can't become a $6 trillion company or 7 trillion. How do you know? What do you know? Do you know if they're going to come out with a car? Do you know if they're going to come out with something else that changes how we interact with each other? So I say all of that just because don't be so naive to think that you have it all figured out. Be diversified if that's what you want to do. Know your risk tolerance. It's personal finance, and just make sure you do your homework.
I agree. I think that's a great point. I have 2 points just to add to this. I think number one, I've been saying for the past couple of weeks publicly, I think the stock's going to fall back down to 7, 8. I mean, after earnings, I was like, it's probably going to come back down. And my bet was like, look, I need to feel that this hype is validated. I think yesterday's conference proved that there's legit stuff here. Like, this is real. It can grow. The inbound demand that Karp is speaking about is really exciting to hear about, because if that's the case, then sandbagging is going on for Q2 and full year guidance growth, and they might have a quarter. I don't know if it's next quarter, the quarter 8 or 4 quarters later, where they pull in Nvidia. Where they're like, hey, we're gonna get 60% more revenue growth than you guys thought we were gonna get, and the whole stock is repriced. The whole narrative shifts. It's not an overvalued company now. Now it's a monopoly on GPUs, and like you're out, because if you weren't in Nvidia in the 300s or 250s, it's going to be hard to get back there.
But
again.
that's exactly the risk of relying too much on the DCFs, because as we mentioned, if like from a purely numerical standpoint, right now Palantir is not that appealing. It still dilutes a lot. The free cash flow is still compressed. The growth is not so much. But in order to understand if it is truly undervalued, overvalued, or what, the DCF is not enough. The DCF is just a tool, and you need to consider it as such. A tool you try to exploit to have an intuition. But what you are seeing in terms of business, the qualitative things that generate the numbers, those are the most important things. Because, for instance, if you just look at the numbers, you say, okay, this company has no hope of recovering the growth. But by checking all the qualitative stuff we are discussing about, the hints that the acceleration will be there are actually there. And what's nice of having followed the company so closely is that we can trust or not trust Karp. And I would say at this point, Karp has gained my trust. So if he says the demand is there, the clients are talking with other clients, unlocking network effects, that is there. Now, we'll get into numbers immediately. As Matt said, maybe it takes some quarters. But if we made our job diligently, we can wait. If you are just in for the $50, the $20 now, that could be a risk, because maybe you lose the patience just before all the good things start being incorporated into the numbers. Sorry for the interruption.
No, that was good. That was exactly what I was going to say. So that was great. All right, we got to get into some news that's not that good, and I honestly don't know how to feel about it. Want to know your guys' thoughts, so let's bring it up and see what you guys have to say. CTO Palantir Shamsankar sold $15 million worth of stock as part of a 10b5-1 plan. He converted B shares into A shares and then sold them at $15 a share. This transaction is part of a related series of transactions. The reporting person converted 791,000 shares of B to A, then sold the resulting shares of Class A, along with 240,000 additional shares of Class A, and this is all legal under the 10B rule. And he sold them at $15 a pop. I don't know. Bearish, not a concern. Sham doesn't have enough faith. Anyone have any thoughts on this one? Arnie, you want to go?
We have been discussing insider selling for quite a long time, and we have seen that insiders sell basically regardless of the stock price, because basically it was even Shyam who sold a big chunk at the bottom, him along with other insiders. So is insiders necessarily a bad thing? Not necessarily. Obviously, is not nice to see, and I think this is one of those things that don't really impact negatively. It's just, okay, I would have preferred this not to be out, especially because it's not just a one-off event, it's a sort of recurring. But on the other side, I understand Shyam. He has been invested de facto for 20 years in one company, and he's also scared, maybe. He's also scared of, maybe he has some plans, and he's scared of, okay, now the stock goes back to 6. Imagine how much difference it could make when it comes to not 100 shares, but these thousands of shares. So overall, not worried. It's just not nice to see. What I can say, if just to be the lion, the keyboard lion, doesn't excite me to think he's selling Palantir for DNA, which is a company that never inspired me. So if I want to criticize, I can criticize that. Because
he's on the board of DNA, and he bought 400,000 shares recently. Correct.
He's on the board of that company, and I haven't studied the company well. I can just say it is that kind of company that looks a little bit shady for me. I just have bad vibes because rather than being a company that say something and actually really show execution on that front, like Upsellera, you see they have a similar business model, but you have actual proof that their business case actually worked. And it was just enough one molecule with COVID to prove, okay, the business model works. It is just incredibly early, but the company has the cash there, even without the all the COVID stuff, it is sustainable. So having the direct comparison with Upsellera, my bad feelings toward DNA are sort of validated. But again, I don't know the company. Maybe he's inside the board. He knows something really exceptional is coming out. So I hope him, obviously, the best of luck. It's just something I don't fully understand.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I don't know Sham's personal finances. I don't know what's going on in his life, right? Like he's worked at this company for God knows how many years. He has an opportunity to take some profits off the board. Yeah, would we like him to see buy some shares? Of course. Maybe he goes and buys them when they're cheaper. You know, I mean, this stock did just run up over 123% in like less than 30 days. So I wouldn't sweat it too much. You know, I wouldn't get too. I think sometimes we get too worried about the insider movement within companies. I think it's harder to tell signs when people sell shares. I think it's easier to have tells when they buy shares. That's more indicative to actual something that tells me something.
Okay, Matt, any thoughts on this? Or we can move on.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the transaction history, he gets paid a pretty significant amount. He's the CTO, right, which is top of the house. Executives get paid a lot of their money in share compensation. You'd actually probably be surprised at how low the salaries are. You'd anticipate salaries for some of these executives to be tens of 20s of millions of dollars. In reality, it's probably in the several hundreds of thousands, maybe $1 million range. And the majority of their compensation truly comes from the stock ownership piece, right? The share-based compensation. And I see that within my own organization, an undisclosed oil company, and I see that many other organizations as well, where the first year that person gets into office in the executive suite, like, man, they only made, $1 million. You'd expect them to get more. And next thing you know, they're getting 10 million, 15 million, 20 million. And it's all based off of what kind of milestones you meet. When you are on their executive board, you have to meet all these, that's who's basically coming up with their pay compensation, right?
Sorry, Matt. I'm just checking. Shyam Sankar made $700K in total compensation as a chief operating officer in 2021. So actually, it fits perfectly in line with what we are saying. We are not talking about already tens of millions in terms of salary. It is true that the biggest part of their compensation is in stock in order to make them move, because the harsh reality is that if you are paid too much in cash, then you're fine. But if you are paid in stocks, you are heavily incentivized to actually create value. Otherwise, those stocks will not move.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we don't know, right, and just like you guys don't know, is how many RSUs, restricted stock units, are in the pipeline that Sham's going to receive, right? This is just what we've seen he's getting this quarter. He could have millions of shares more coming down the pipeline that you guys don't necessarily know about. And he's sitting there being like, crap, 70% of my net worth is going to be in Palantir stock. If I'm looking ahead 3-4 years from now, I'm pretty confident that those things are going to meet, those metrics are going to meet. So I'm going to be getting another couple million shares of Palantir in the coming quarters. It's probably prudent for me to take some money off the table. And he still has over 1 million shares of Palantir. So here you are sitting here trying to point the finger, and here he has still $15 million worth of shares and probably millions of more on the way in the coming years. So, I know for a fact that when I get some of my RSUs, I sell them because I like to diversify my portfolio. 100% of my income, if I'm not working on YouTube or anything like that, comes from the company I work for. So to get shares in that company as part of my compensation as well, I like to diversify it out. As much as it pays a decent dividend, it's just prudent of me to do. If I lose my job tomorrow, I lost, hundreds of thousands of dollars of income a year. And here I could have been diversifying whatever stock I had, and you never know, just from a standpoint of, say there is some sort of black sheep event and Palantir doesn't go the right way, he's diversifying into something like DNA or something of the like, right? And he could be trying to see, he could be doing exactly what Peter Thiel did, right? Investing in Facebook back in the day, and he could be trying to do what Chamath Palihapitiya had been doing, taking some money out of Facebook and investing in other companies as well. So it's not unusual that you see this happening. And I think anybody that's sitting there pointing the finger is really just trying to feed their own agenda and egos. And they really need to think about, once again, it's personal finance.
I want to bring up some comments from Sachin. He says the guidance of year-end revenue is 2.3 to 2.37 billion. Let's round it up to 2.5, which means the current forward price to sales for year-end is 12 to 13. For any company to exceed the mark of 15 of price to sales is not easy unless you are Snowflake, which is why he also says, I don't think we will see any fast leg ups until something really bullish happens. We should consolidate here in this range of 13 to 16 for a while, which makes sense in the context of Sham, because if theoretically, if we would consolidate in this range, then this other comment that Sachin has, which is executives will always sell when they are dumping hard and with shaky news around, is the shady part. So if it's consolidating at 13 to 16 for the next 5, 6, 7 months and Sham sold at 15, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. If some news comes out tomorrow where, the sky is falling and everything, all hell is breaking loose, and now he's selling 2 weeks before, like Silicon Valley Bank, then you're like, all right, what did I invest in? What's going on, right?
Absolutely in line.
Okay, last topic for the day, and then we're out of here in the next 15 minutes. We had a bear report come out, a short report from the Bear Cave, and they mentioned our good friend Arnie. They said the retail investor hype around Palantir is hard to miss. One Palantir investor launched Palantir Bullets, a newsletter, blah, 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 blah. This went up to like 50,000 people, so I hope you got some more attention from that, Arnie, because that's amazing. He quoted someone on Reddit saying, I can't believe I'm back in the green. I invested at $35, kept averaging to $13.76. I never sold because I trusted in Daddy Carp. That was epic. Every word he said on earnings renewed my vigor for investing. I cannot wait till Palantir hits $100 a share, and then the rest of it is for paid subscribers. So I guess let's start with you, Arnie, since you were the star of this short report. What were your thoughts on the report, why it was published, when it was published, and then basically saying retail is a cult and calling you the cult leader?
Well, I'm not the cult leader, but hey, I didn't expect something like that at all. I just was said on Twitter, hey, you have been mentioned by the Bear Cave. I was like, the Bear Cave? Like that Bear Cave? Because for who hangs around on Twitter, the Bear Cave is like the biggest newsletter on Substack, one of the most highly regarded, that specialized on writing reports on companies that tend to be fraudulent. And hey, is Palantir fraudulent? Like, holy shish! I mean, maybe it's missing something. And I found it, well, it is good to be mentioned. But apart from that, I was really curious to actually read, because hey, maybe I'm stupid, I'm missing something big, and said, okay, let's buy the report and actually test. I'll tell you, I feel I never wasted so much money in so little time. But why? Because what are the most relevant critics we have been discussing so far with Palantir? Consultancy. How true is Palantir as a consultancy? It's like saying Tesla is an automotive. It's like, yes, it is kind of true, but if you only look at it that way, it means you're not doing proper research. Like, there is a component clearly deriving from the automotive, as in Palantir there is clearly a component that is generated from a consultancy business. But thinking that the company is that, and saying the company is a black box and nobody understands, but I understand that is an AI imposter. That's completely illogical already at the first sentence. And how it backs that? Well, no mention to the gross margins, because so far is impossible that a consultancy company has an 80% gross margin unless it is an accounting fraud. So show me the accounting fraud, please. no mention of accounting fraud. So the way the report justifies these claims is going back to old reviews or to comments saying, oh yes, there's a consultancy component. It's like, okay, I mean, is the best you can do. I would be really scared of thinking I write some BS like that, not backed by fact, to 45,000 people. Like, I'm already scared now when I share something on 2,000 people, thinking to reach such a big audience that gets also on Reuters, on Bloomberg, with full of BS is like, I would not do that. Because what they're saying is literally the same complaints we have been discussing. And then the second big point is SPACs. I mean, SPACs, like last year, I was already tired of discussing SPACs because we had proof that, okay, it is a bold bet, weird bet, call it however you want, that didn't go through. But if you look at from a player standpoint, basically what Palantir did was invested 400, getting the commitment to receive 700 or more, I don't remember. Meanwhile, you generate R&D, you help the business actually be tested, be spread, and that was a part of the revenue growth, no doubt about that. But is Palantir an investment holding company? Because if Palantir was an investment holding company, basically making all the business with these contracts, I would be scared, honestly. But since SPACs, even if they went all to zero, the revenues are now from them are gradually declining because some of them go bankrupt. And the company, meanwhile, managed to get GAAP profitable. It's like, okay, I mean, this is a nothing burger. It's something that we already digested, even too much. Even when the report from the New Street Journal in December, October, that period came out about SPACs, it was, okay, what's the news? Like, there's literally nothing new. And final point was salespeople complaining on Glassdoor. And again, we have been discussing this months ago, but how come you don't match that with actually what clients say on Gartner? Because maybe the people who are fired or they just don't fit with a culture, it is normal that they complain on Glassdoor. But
Arnie, you got the whole report? You read through the whole bear report?
I have the whole report, yes.
So you're saying it was SPACs, consulting, and Glassdoor. Those were his three arguments?
Yes.
That is such a bad report.
And I would say,
wow.
For someone who built its name by spotting fraudulent companies, I think it is very irresponsible to do something like that. And actually saying a company like this is an AI imposter, I would say you are the imposter. In
the day before, the morning of AIP conference, without even watching the conference, you say that it's AIP fraud. I mean, that's tough.
Arnie said it all, but I'm just keep in mind our three-letter agencies and the most important part of our defense system uses this software and has for over a decade. Show me another software company that is battle tested, that three-letter agencies are using. The only other two companies that are IL6 certified are Amazon and Microsoft. And the last time I checked, those aren't frauds. So I think someone just wants some attention.
Or, I mean, this is a short report written by someone who claims I don't take the position against because I want to be neutral and I want to be paid by subscription. However, this creates the incentive for someone else to basically use him as a distributor. So maybe that was a move paid, and so far we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that was my biggest thing. Go ahead.
Maybe there's not a disclosure required to do that. He's a distributor. He's like a newspaper. So
No, but that's a real point because look, he has 45,000 subscribers. There is definitely things that have happened. I mean, I've gotten these crazy offers where people be like, hey, if you just publish this, we'll give you a shit ton of money because you have influence. And obviously you don't disclose it, right? It's a very unethical thing to do. But if he's not short the stock and he's putting a paywall behind the short report, and you just told me the short report is 3 arguments that are really bad arguments, he might have got paid to do it, or he might be trying to get the transaction revenue from that $64 to finance his report, when in reality, if you were just short the company and you put out the report and hundreds of thousands of people read it and sold the stock because it truly was a Ponzi scheme, AI fraud, you would make way more, money on the downside of the short. And so that already made the whole, like when Hindenburg shorts, they put out the whole report. They want everyone to see it because they know if their information is legit, then Square, which they recently said they were short, should drop 70%. It dropped like 10% because the short report was trash, right? So that already made it hard. Matt, what were your thoughts on the short report when it came out?
Very much the same. I mean, I'll just keep it short and sweet. I thought it was just like a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people doing very superficial coverage on the company right now because it's very popular. And, I'm fine with, like I said, I'm fine with people joining the community. I'm fine with people newly finding the community. What I'm not okay with is people jumping on a bandwagon just because they think it's going to be a meme stock like it was kind of in 2021. I'm all for people making their paper, but to try to get clout, it's kind of embarrassing and a little crappy. So I'm not 100% fan of that. I mean,
Matt, is the flip side, the company is getting so popular that as people, even on the short side, are using it for clout, that's good for the stock, just like Tesla back in 2020 with their short reports?
I mean,
for the overall awareness of the company, I guess.
I don't think it's either here or there. I mean, I'm more of a person that kind of believes in the company and the stock will follow personally, but it is what it is in that respect. But I still think that the SPAC piece has time to play out. Black Sky was up 8% today. Maybe it was yesterday. And they're doing relatively well. They're putting rockets into space in collaboration with Rocket Lab. Not rockets, but pieces of kit into space in collaboration with Rocket Lab. Tritium is making superchargers. They're blowing up across Europe. They're about to open up a plant in Tennessee. Sign more deals in January with undisclosed oil companies. So, I mean, I don't think that all those companies are dead, even though Wejo went bankrupt. I still think there's running room, right? And what was the third thing?
I think Lilium, or are you looking for a?
No, I'm third topic. I forget what the third topic was, but it's
I don't even know. Yeah. But you made your point. Arnie, go ahead. You share your screen.
Well, I'll take the opportunity to ask you this question. I made a poll with. Will we see other Palantir short reports? Here, the results say 63% of the people think there will be other short reports, which triggers to me the question I received yesterday from David from the Byteside channel. He asked me, okay, let's say there will be other short reports. If you were a short hedge fund, what trigger point would you try to crash the stock?
So what would you use to
exactly? So you are an analyst at an hedge fund. Your job is shorting this company because you feel that is shady, or just because even if you don't really understand the company, you just feel there is a shorting opportunity to make money, because there are some certain conditions that for you as a short seller are appealing, like it is a stock which has a retail crowd. It is a stock that is surfing this wave of AI that could be already seen as bubbly, but the fact that it's bubble or not really depends on how companies actually implement that.
I would go the AI angle. I would go that angle. I would be like AI's buzz. It's not as big as we think it is. GPUs are real. NVIDIA is real. Maybe Tesla FSD is real. Palantir is just a chat GPT for companies. It's not real. That would be my angle if I had to go.
I was just hoping the stock was going to go down lower so I could buy more shares.
I think a lot of us, yeah.
I was like, oh, come on, let this crap actually send it back.
And that's the thing, the price was resilient like,
Yeah.
it's been resilient all week. And against the bear report to 50,000 subscribers, nothing. Barely. It hit all-time highs that day, 15, 20.
Even Airbnb suffered a bit when the bear cave dropped a report on that. And Airbnb is already a huge company. It's 3x at Palantir or 2x.
The stock's getting resilient, man. The stock is getting resilient. I don't know if it gets back down to 9 or 10. Maybe it gets a little lower.
Sachin said, "I'll get my opportunities."
But here's the thing: if the retail community is as big as we think it is, and all of us are like, oh, we wish we bought at 9, 10, or even 11. If it gets back down and we start seeing a dip, I think a lot of us will start getting back in, and that's going to be a little bit harder for it to keep going lower. You know,
Maybe we'll have another saga of the retail people against Wall Street, because I'll tell you from how short seller think, seeing a lot of retail means yummy food to to smash. But the problem is if you go against a crowd of retail that are actually informed, short sellers can actually risk a lot. So far the short interest is not high, but who knows? Maybe if the Palantir stock moves in a direction that makes them even more angry, and then you start seeing more short sellers arguing the same things, you will have a similar phase like Tesla when it was heavily shorted.
Yeah, Nick, to this super chat, thank you for that. If Palantir's a GameStop run-up, will long-term investors face any risk? I think all of us would sell if it ran up to like 250 in a month, right? So if that does happen, yeah, long-term investors will face a risk, but the risk will be to get out as soon as you can, because that's crazy, right? GameStop, whatever crazy run-up it has, and then just get back in when it comes back to earth. But I don't think it's going to have a GameStop run.
Yep. I would follow that. But I think one of the things I think people don't recognize is just like with the NHS thing, right? It's probably a Soros-based, Soros-backed sort of problem, right? And you saw the same thing with when Elon bought Twitter. You know, you're always going to have these billionaires that play in the shadow governments and try to use the public as bait. And so you have to think, you know, there's always going to be something along the lines with Palantir that is always going to be, you know, in billionaires fighting in proxy with each other because somebody didn't want to go to Ukraine, or you know, there's a billionaire like Soros that's in the UK and he always wants the UK to fail for some reason, or you know, maybe there's going to be somebody in South America that tries to have some sort of campaign like, oh, American spies want to take over South America, and you know, it's funded by somebody that's extremely wealthy in South America who probably doesn't want things to change the way that they are because he's already a billionaire in South America, right? So you have to think that a lot of times these things come out, just like how Bill Gates was shorting Tesla, right? Like, what was the reason for Bill Gates to short Tesla? You know, he already has billions upon billions of dollars that he's focusing on changing the world with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Why is he trying to put $1 billion, you know, shorts within Tesla? It doesn't make any sense. And I think a lot of it is just billionaires playing billionaire boy club with each other, and it's their playground and they're trying to bully each other around. And I think in the end of the day, a lot of people don't really think about it that way. It gets fed with the propaganda and an MO of one way or another, just like what happened with the NHS thing. But you have to think it's this on a smaller scale, right? Mm-hmm. I get paid to make investment videos and highlight investor reports on my YouTube channel about gold companies or, you know, other small cap companies as well. You know, I'm not sitting there being like, oh, you should buy the stock, right? But I'm sitting there, you know, kind of overviewing the presentation. And you know, I have CEOs on the channel as well. So it's like, you have to think like these people do this all the time. They go on CNBC and kind of put their stock out there. It's no different than people coming on Twitter and putting out a bear report. You know, the Jacob CEO went on CNBC. What is he trying to do? He's trying to pump up the stock, right? And Jim Cramer, you know, just do it the opposite of what he always says, because it always is the wrong thing. Who knows? Maybe he's being paid off by everybody as well. But, you know, it's no different. You have to think at the end of the day, all these things are run by advertising, just like Amit's YouTube channel. It's run by advertising. Twitter, run by advertising. CNBC, Fox Business, run by advertising, right? So it's about getting eyes on your articles, not about really the truth anymore. People don't really have that sort of real, you know, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Integrity. Not saying that your YouTube channel doesn't have integrity, Amit, but I'm just saying when you think about the news, they're more so, trying to scare people out of investing in the stock market.
You've got to get people to click. I mean, that's the hard part about being a content creator, is not selling your soul for the click, but still
over the last probably like the first 3 months of the year, you probably would have been scared shitless to invest in the stock market. Meanwhile, smart people were picking up your Google and Amazon in the 80s and 90s, and now look, they're in the 120s again. Not to say that it's not going to go back down in the short term. It probably will have a 10 to 15% pullback just because it's a little bit overrun and long in the tooth. But you have to think, like CNBC, it took them a long time. Now that they're switching their tone, acting like since we're within 15% of all-time highs that we're going to blow past 5,000 on the S&P, it's probably that you should think about the opposite, right? So you always have to think about where people sit and, what their agendas are and perspective, right? We always talk about this perspective. Somebody could say, I think the S&P is going down. I don't think you should put money. It's just like, well, yeah, I think the S&P is going to pull back 5-10% within the next dozen months because it's up 20% within the last 6 months. Doesn't mean that in the long term, you shouldn't invest in the S&P 500. It's all about perspective. It's all about understanding where that person's words are coming from, what time frame they're looking at, and what their objectives are,
and you
what their risk tolerance is.
Someone else to get your conviction. You can't borrow Matt's conviction, my conviction, Amit's conviction. Like you can't do your homework. Like learn this stuff if you're willing to risk your finances and do individual investing. And if not, put it in the index and you'll be fine. You'll still live comfortably by disciplined personal finance behavior.
Yeah. And I think a perfect example of this, and Arnie, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but it's like you had people that were coming onto this show weekly, like yourself, Arnie, that had 80% of their net worth invested in this company. Then you have people like myself who is very much into diversification. And I have a rather large position, but if you compare it in towards of a total portfolio, way less than 80%. I think at one point, and now it's probably at still less than 6%. I think it's still less than 5% of my portfolio. And yet, if I told you the amount of shares, a lot of you guys in the chat section would be like, holy shit, it's a lot of shares. But you think about it, it's, all based off of, what people's risk tolerances are and everything like. And I still have a lot of conviction in the stock. Don't get me wrong. And I use it every day, but it's about what makes me sleep well at night, right? If I lost that, 4,000 shares of Palantir and it goes to zero, I might be upset. But, I'm not going to go bankrupt, and I'm not going to be living under the bridge, that's behind me and, and my skyscraper or whatever the hell I live in. Humble brag. But, it puts things into perspective, right? Versus if somebody else had that, it could be their entire life savings. So you have to think, when these people come on and tout things, where they sit and all that. And Arnie, I didn't mean to cut you off. So.
No, I was just thinking that for us that have done more than 2 years of research, we know what we are talking about. Short sellers opportunity would be the biggest opportunity we could have, because meanwhile we have a lot of validations. Before I mentioned the Ukraine, AAP, which are truly important milestone for the company. And every day this company is destroying its moat or is actually building the moat. So if the company is actually building the moat every day, it becomes only a matter of stock price for being happy to buy more. If we will see a bunch of short sellers being convinced, oh, no, this company is overpriced, actually that would make us a favor. So please, guys, please, short sellers, listen to this. At least try to write a good report so that at least I will put the effort to try to understand if I'm right or not.
Yeah, I have two things on this. Number one, I'm enjoying the ride because, again, I don't want to sell, and I'll if it comes back, yeah, we'll buy. If it doesn't, I have enough shares where I'm like, well, if this gets to $20-$25, it'll be nice to see how much I'm up on my portfolio. So I'm kind of just enjoying the ride and hoping it continues. And if it does come back, then it does come back. Second, the macro, yes, might not support the valuation. As we're all talking about. The problem is if the Fed actually pauses in June, which the Wall Street Journal reported that they're going to, and CPI comes in lower in June and July, we get to like 4.9 to 4.1, the Fed's going to have to really think hard to hike in July. And if they don't hike in July and pause, and CPI gets down to the 3.7s by August, September, and it's officially paused, and maybe November there's a cut, the macro might end up supporting a lot of valuations that seemed overstretched. And on top of that, Palantir is going to have a quarterly earnings by August, in which we're going to see some results where if they don't sandbag and they beat, that is another catalyst. Not to mention S&P 500 inclusion coming up early next year. So there's a lot of stuff here. It could retrace, and that would be a really good opportunity. But if it doesn't, then it might be.
And we're averaging up.
And we're averaging up. Yeah.
Well, let me speculate a little bit. Disclosure, this is more speculation, but based on true facts. I think we are not in an AI bubble until we have clearly signs that the trend is over.
Yes.
You know, finance moves with trend. Trends are like themes. Cathy Wood is specialized in themes. And a theme is something that starts very early. Only few people are interested in that. And then maybe a theme explodes. Everybody talks about that. I'm thinking of ESG. I'm thinking of EV. Every moment has its own trends. What's the trend right now is AI. Our job as investors is trying to understand if there is some value in it, is something that actually changes companies, and if that is true, what are the companies that could benefit from it, but for real, not for just the stock price rising. A key sign that the trend is very mature and close to explosion, meaning that, okay, it has done the most they could do in that period, is when you see a lot of activity from investment banks, meaning a lot of IPOs, a lot of SPACs, a lot of M&As. That is a sign that the trend is basically saturated, because if investment banks work so hard to push all these companies public, it means that there is a huge opportunity for the bank to make companies oversell themselves at a crazy valuation to get money. And the simple thought I shared yesterday was not an AI bubble until Chamath Palihapitiya dumps 100 SPACs, because that is a clear sign. If you do that, it means that it is very convenient for the company to receive money from investors, because what you are selling, the story, is much more than the business you are trying to develop. The fact that so far we haven't seen yet exactly how Sachin says, we have a lot of interest in AI, but we haven't seen yet a single AI IPO. This is a sign that we are still very early in this wave, and
Very
it's a
early.
wave that, as far as we have seen with AIP, is not a buzzword, is not well, apart from some company we we know well. But in the case of Palantir, we really see clients being happy of the value unlocked. This changes everything.
Yeah, I agree.
Can I just say I appreciate all three of you for all the content you've continually put out, constantly, weekly, the newsletters, your YouTube channels, and admit you're coming up on 20,000 subscribers. So if you're not subscribed to Mit's channel, do it. And thank you for all the people who are here on a Friday night listening to us. We'd probably do it if there was no one here anyways. Just
We were doing it when there were 70 people in 2022,
yeah.
man. I remember those days.
We're so passionate about the company. Like, that's another thing too for me. Like, if I couldn't envision myself working for that company, I wouldn't invest in that company. That's just one of my rules. But just wanted to give you guys mad props, because it's hard to stay consistent, especially when things aren't looking good. Now, all of a sudden, everyone's talking about Palantir again. So,
but that's also the fun part about the journey, right? I mean, I talked about this before, the friendships we're gaining and just the relationships we're building. We went through a really bad bear market when we still did our due diligence, talked about the good and the bad. And now we're so wedded to the stock. We're so skeptical that it's running up 130%, because we're like, what is going on? It's not supposed to do this. But sometimes we can enjoy a little bit of the fruits of our labor and see how it plays out.
For sure.
But that's the thing. I think with that, while we can celebrate for the fact that we can be a little bit relieved, right? We can see that the stock can go back up to 15, recognize that it could just as easily, as Amit said, go back to $7 to $8. And, we saw the same thing with Meta earlier this year when people were able to pick it up below $90. And we were like, everyone thought that it was going to zero back then. And I was picking up Google and Amazon in the 80s and 90s, and people were saying, oh, it's going to go to the 50s. It's still so overvalued. And it was, both of those were up, I think Google was at least $150 a share when it split, and Amazon was over $180 after the split. It was at $3,600 a share pre-split. So you think about it, it's like all those companies were down over 50% at one point. And, I don't think that people would have even thought companies with that sort of magnitude, $500 billion plus market caps, can go through the sort of volatility that they did in 2022. And here we are kind of showing that it's possible. And so don't, just because you're one of the things I guess to say, if you're here for a short term, maybe it is a good idea to take some profits. But, if you're here for the long term, don't be surprised if this thing retraces a good bit. And I saw somebody say, not all bear markets retrace, or after big run-ups that don't always retrace. But at the end of the day, it's not unusual after 5-6 years for these things to pull back massively. I remember Apple was trading at a 12 or 14 price to earnings back in 2016, and I thought the company was done. I was like, it's going to get to $1 trillion. No company's worth $1 trillion. It never been happened before. And here we are sitting at companies that are now getting into the $3 trillion range, and it's 3x in the matter of, less than 10 years. It's absolutely astonishing to hear. And the thing that I'm going to be most looking at, I've talked about it before, customer count growth, net dollar retention. But now that we are profitable, and Arnie, you touched on the gross margins, 80%, I'm going to be looking at net margins. How does that really expand now that we are profitable and we are starting to get that revenue up and to the right? We're going to start getting into the single digits. And at what point are we going to really level off? Is it going to be 40% margin net, or is it going to be 50? What kind of comps can we kind of get from that standpoint? Are we going to be matching the Visas of the world that are 50-60% margins? Or I'm just trying to understand where it stops, right? Are we going to be able to keep our sales and administrative costs down to the point where when you're sitting here in 5-10 years looking at a company that has $5-10 billion worth of revenue, are we talking a company that's making $2.5 billion in earnings, or are we talking about a company that's still only making 500, right? And that's where I'm really going to start focusing on, is how does that net margin creep up? Is the running rate really going to be a true indicative sign? Because if you get to the point where you have a 50% net margin and you're talking, a $5 billion a year in the next 2 to 3 years, you're looking at $2.5 billion net income potentially. I mean, that's when you start recognizing, like, oh shit, now if it goes to a $10 billion revenue by the 2030 timeframe, you're looking at $5 billion net. I mean, that starts to be moving pretty quick, right? So that's where I'm really looking for. How does that gross margin, now that we're profitable, really start to relate to the net margin piece? Because we've always been a negative net margin business. So I'm really just starting to look at how they can kind of keep costs down, and with especially all the customer counts kind of coming in, are their OpEx, is their OpEx going to explode? And that's where I'm going to be looking.
Let's get to the S&P 500 first. Let's get 4 quarters.
I don't care about
get
that.
Get in the S&P 500, and then we can go net profit.
I don't care about that stuff, man. That's a part of the journey. It's a part of the journey.
I get it. I'm just saying, I think you're going to have that conversation before high net profit margins.
I would agree. I'm just looking at it.
I get what you're saying. I'm just saying, like, we're not going to see those net profit margins in the near few quarters.
Yeah.
But that is when you really start talking about the elite capabilities of, okay, trillion market cap. Like, you're having those kind of conversations on net margins and stuff like that. Yeah. I totally get what you're saying.
I think it is very premature to thinking of net margins, because net margins means you are saving cost. If you are saving cost, it means in this case, Palantir is not already a monopoly. When you are trying to build a monopoly, first you need to capture the market. And especially combined with the aggressive assertions, Karp said, we are going to take the whole market. Our pricing strategy is first we unlock value, and then we get paid. Palantir is very prone to delay the gratification the more they can. This combined relatively lower revenues, relatively high cost to get the clients up and running, make them scale. I think the priority for them is just get profitability, keep 1 cent for some quarters, just to enter the S&P 500, get the reputation. Once they reach like 70-80% of the market, then is where you can start thinking, okay, now is not worth pushing so much. Now I can thinking of, okay, now I expand the margin.
Can we have Amit highlight Baba's comment to end on a funny note? He said, owning Palantir and looking at Snowflake is like going to the strip club when you're married to Adriana.
Well, on that note,
there you go,
that's it
Chris.
for
That's
us.
how we're going to end it.
That's how we're gonna end it. All right, thank you guys. This was super fun. Great stuff. Great discussions. Hopefully, it gave some mental clarity to a lot of shareholders that are thinking about the stock price overvaluation. I think we touched on some really good stuff. Matt had some amazing insights. Arnie, Dom, great stuff. And I think the conclusion is, look, it might be undervalued, might be overvalued, but ultimately, if you have conviction for the long term, then AIP kind of proved this company might be the real deal.
For sure. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yep. Everyone's Twitter in the description. Please check them out. Please follow. We'll see you guys next Friday. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.